Good evening, investors, my colleagues, and other friends who have joined in the webinar. First of all, I would like to thank you for taking your time out and attending this webinar. And I also like to thank my colleague, Mr. Deepak Jasani, who is a well-known face in the capital market. Thank you for giving us time, Deepak. And our investors are certainly going to be benefited if they're going to make a patient hearing in this webinar in regarding generally to the IPO and why people want to invest in IPO and what is the current trend, today's buzzword RBL IPO, which has been in the market. And I just got a news that it's hit almost 9 times in just 1 hour's time. So before getting into the subject, I would like to introduce Deepak Jasani, who heads the retail research desk of HDFC Securities, who has more than 22 decades of experience in the capital market. Not taking much time, I would give the mic to Deepak Jasani to go ahead and brief about IPOs, and benefits of the IPOs, and few words about RBL IPO. Over to you, Deepak.
Thank you, Sampath. Being the head of business development at HDFC Securities, this is a good initiative that you have taken by hosting this webinar and inviting people to interact with us, know from us about the IPOs generally, as well as the latest IPOs which are available. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you to this webinar. We will be in a question answer mode, Sampath, and we will be discussing about IPOs initially, and then probably we'll take questions from the participants who have logged in and put in their questions already on the system. Yeah, now over to you, Sampath.
Um, so Deepak, I think we have already got flooded with questions, and we are very amazed with the kind of response we have been getting across from the investors. I can see in front of my screen investors all over the world. For a few questions from Qatar, a few questions from remote locations like Bellary have already flooding in. I think if I have to make one filter and ask you, nowadays we hear a lot about IPOs. What is an initial public offering?
Yes, Sampath, an IPO or an initial public offering is the first sale by a company of shares to the public. The sale of shares can be by way of a fresh issue, which is the company itself issuing fresh shares and raising capital, or it can be by way of an offer for sale by existing investors. When a company makes a fresh issue, it is meant to be used for specified purposes. At times, we have a combination of a fresh issue as well as an offer for sale. So, this is broadly what an IPO is about.
Okay. I think you can explain it better than that. Thank you, Deepak. I think there has been some basic questions. I don't mind. I would be really glad if you can address that as well. Why do companies go for an IPO or become public?
Yeah, Sampath, typically an IPO raises funds for a company. So that is the first prime purpose for an IPO. It also dilutes the holding or equity stake by the promoters, and public also become part of the share owners. It boosts the image of the company in the eyes of the investors, lenders, borrowers, creditors, etc. It also brings discipline on the part of the promoters in terms of corporate governance and in terms of disclosure requirements. And it also creates a track record for future capital raising. So, broadly, these are the purposes for which an IPO is made.
Thank you again. Deepak, there has been a lot of queries when it comes to the recent IPOs, which got listed maybe this financial year, if we can take. How would you rate them or relate them in terms of returns, which is the key parameter which every investor would be very keenly wanting to know how they have fared in the last 1 year, the IPOs which got listed in the last 1 year.
Yes, you're right, Sampath. Recently, a lot of IPOs, including the likes of Quest Corp, Thyrocare, Advanced Enzyme, etc., have given very good returns to the investors upon listing. The returns have been between, say, 24% to 58%. There's a broad range. But at the same time, one will have to be very careful as to what kind of IPOs one invests in. One will have to look into, study, evaluate the RHP, the red herring prospectus. One will have to go for advice from the respective brokers and read reviews about the IPO, which are available on the net. So broadly, by doing this homework, one will take a view as to whether a IPO is worthy investing or not, and based on that, one can go ahead and invest in IPOs. Mind well, some IPOs have also given negative returns on listing, the likes of Quick Hill, Healthcare Global, etc. So one will have to be a little careful in deciding about the which IPOs to invest in.
Uh, how much you think that as a retail investor, how much money you think is required to apply in an IPO?
Yeah, each IPO has a quota for different kind of investors. Typically, the allocation for the QIBs, that is qualified institutional uh, participants, is not less than 50% in every IPO. The allocation for retailers could be anywhere between 25 to 35, and the balance is for the HNIs. Now, for a retailer, as per the SEBI norms, an application cannot be made for an amount more than rupees 2 lakhs. However, whenever issue is oversubscribed, each retail application is given equal weight for the purpose of allotment. So, hence, in such cases, it is advisable for retailers to apply for minimum bid size, which is typically around rupees 15,000. There is no point in blocking more amount and having an equal weightage with a person who has applied for lower amount.
I think the one word which has again been asked by many of the investors, we can see here also. Does the investor have to move funds out of his bank account while applying for these IPOs?
No, Sampath. Now, as per SEBI regulations, investments in IPOs have to be made through AS ASBA. ASBA, the full form is Application Supported by Blocked Amounts. Under ASBA, you can invest in public issues by authorizing your bank to block an amount equivalent to the application amount in the linked bank account. The application amount is not debited from your bank account but remains blocked till completion of the allotment process. On allotment, the amount required will be debited from your bank account, whereas in case of refund or non-allotment, the amount will be unblocked. So the process is as simple as that, and typically the entire process takes not more than 7 days.
Okay. Okay. I think ASBA can't be explained better than this, Deepak.
Yeah.
What do you think would be a retail investor? See, today I'm assuming that most of our customers who are attending this webinar are also complete retail investors. What do you think would be and your advice to these retail investors to start investing in IPOs? Somebody has to take a decision to invest in IPOs. What do your advice, Deepak?
Yes, IPOs typically are the first steps for any investors who want to take a direct exposure to equities. IPOs are typically attractively priced and issued after due diligence by the merchant bankers. So a lot of due diligence and a lot of work is done in advance by an external agency. Uh, while an investor can choose to sell the allotted shares on listing, you could take your call as to whether you want to retain those shares and participate in the up move post listing also. We have seen certain stocks like Ujjivan where post listing the shares have risen quite well in the ensuing couple of months.
Okay, okay, okay. So I'll come. I think you have actually opened up a lot of questions in that last part, which I will certainly like to revisit maybe towards the end of the our webinar. What do you think is our view today? I'm sure most of the retail investors have come to hear from us, on the view of the current IPO which is running right now on the RBL. What is your view about that, which has opened up today?
RBL is a private sector bank which has come into the market after a gap of 11 years. The last time we had an IPO from a private sector bank was Yes Bank in the year 2005. We know that Yes Bank was the IPO was at 45 rupees and the current price is at about 1336. Uh, Private sector banks have given good returns year after year over the last several years. Typically, in an emerging market, banks are proxy for the economy. And private sector banks are even considered better because they are in tune with the times and they take proactive action on various fronts. Ratnagar Bank has come after a gap of 11 years. The IPO size is about 1200 crores. IPO is going to open, has opened today and will remain open till 23rd of August. Investors can apply in lots of 65 shares. The bank has grown very fast over the last 4 years. It has grown at more than 50% in terms of its asset size. It's the bank has a very long history. Started in 1943 from the interior areas of Maharashtra. Sangli and Kolhapur were the two areas where it set up the initial branches. Currently, it has some 197 bank branches and about 362 ATMs. This gives a broad indication about the stature of the bank. The RBL Bank is offered at a price band of 224 to 225. Now, at the higher end, it is priced at 2.25 times FY16 adjusted book value. Now, currently, most of the private sector banks are quoting at between 2.8 times to 4.4 times FY16 adjusted book value. So, this gives an indication about the valuation and the potential.
I think before getting into other few questions, I think one last question would be on to uh, 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 on the as far as the retail investors is concerned, as far as the HNI customers is concerned, the IPOs. What do you think about the future IPOs? Also, if you can just touch upon that, not only about the RBL but also the future IPOs. If you can just why there are so many IPOs which has been landed currently. Is there an IPO season which is emerging? So could you just touch upon that because there are a lot of queries on that as well.
Correct. Now, based on the returns on the recent IPOs, the investor community has got very excited on the IPOs, and sensing that a lot of issuers have sort of preponed their issues. Now we have ICICI Pru Life, we have Vodafone, we have PNB Housing, Center for Sight, etc. A lot of companies which have lined up IPOs over the next 3, 4, 5 months. So I think IPOs will keep coming in, and investors will get chance to participate in them.
Oh, fine, great, great. Thank you very much, Deepak. I think
Now
maybe
let me ask you some questions.
sure, certainly,
Now it is
certainly.
my turn to
Yeah,
ask you a few questions. Now
yes.
the I wanted to ask you as to how easy it is for an investors to apply for IPOs in through HDFC Securities.
I think considering the changing environment today in terms of financial space, the digitization is the buzzword. So we have done all the possible aspects through HDFC Securities. You can just log in using your user ID and password and just go to our site and click the IPO option and straight you can. We have been sending notification to our investors. We have been sending mailers to our investors. All they just need just a click away for investors who don't have time
So there is no need to fill up forms and make
Absolutely.
signatures and go and deliver to a bank and such like.
No, absolutely. These are all the myth which we have covered it completely. It's a paperless IPO I can call through HDFC Securities. That's the whole advantage of coming to HDFC Securities. You can just come to our site and click it, or you can just call. Even we have the convenience of our call center. You can call to our call center and apply for an IPO if you have an account with us, or you can call our branches and you can call your relationship managers. There are multiple ways and avenues that, considering the time factor, which is very key for investors today, we have all the options available and made as convenient as possible in HDFC Securities to apply not only for this but any IPO. Deepak.
How I think HDFC Securities is one of the biggest participants in all the IPOs.
Yes, very true, very true. We are significant participants. We are always in the space of 8 to 10% market share in the IPO space. We have been very cautious, and at the same time we have been very open to our investors by giving the necessary information to the investors and the right information for the investors on the IPO space is concerned. So we've been maintaining for quite some time the 8 to 10% market share in IPO space.
Now, does the investor have to undergo any formalities for participating in this online IPO application?
I think after the ASBA thing in place, I think it has made life very, very investor, thanks to the regulators also as well, for making the life of investors very transparent system in place. So I think the more and more transparency coming into it, the lesser the paper, the lesser the tension in terms of filling up the forms and other formalities being done. I don't think there is any such thing.
So once you have signed up as a client of HDFC Securities, there is not much more to do for applying for an IPO.
Absolutely not. We have in fact very recently concluded IPO, which was L&T Infotech. We had first time investors. We had a lot of investors, close to 85,000 investors participated. They're all happy investors in terms of flawless applications being applied through us, Deepak.
Very good. Now, how will the investor know about the progress of his application?
Yes, there is a tracking mechanism also. It's a very robust tracking mechanism which we have in the system to inform the client whether his application is being rejected or processed, or what is the status of that. An SMS alert, a mail alert is being sent to the customers in terms of the status of the application form. So we have a very robust system in place to track your application status as well.
So net, I think it's a very convenient way of applying in IPO.
I would say that's a very diplomatic way of saying. I think I would more confidently say it's the most user-friendly way of applying IPO is through us in terms of all the avenues, all the options available we are offering to the investors on the investor friendliness is concerned.
Good. Now, shall we take some questions?
Certainly, Deepak. I think I would also request maybe our technical team who is sitting here to maybe to give that slide which we have made for the investors to just take a look how exactly the IPOs which we were discussing Deepak have fared. Maybe just 1 minute they can just take a look at it so that it will be an information. It might not be an influencing factor for you to invest, but it can be an information. You can use it how the past IPOs have performed.
Yeah, some of them may have given negative.
I think our technical, some of them very rightly said. Few of them have given negative returns. Few of them fared extremely well, as high as 50%, correct? And
correct, right.
Few have given close to 30%. I think Ujjain is a very classical example. On the day of IPO, it was only 10%, but then down the line, the rally, you and me know the rally better, how it exactly fared. So yeah, sure, we will take the questions. I think we have been getting questions, almost 100 questions. We'll try to answer a few of them.
Yeah, so the one of the common questions is about whether one should apply for RBL IPO. Now, I have already covered that. You can sort of see the difference in the PBV of RBL and the other private sector banks and take your own call. Because on most other parameters, this company is on par with a smaller sized or a mid-sized private sector banks. So on that basis, I think you can take your own call. Being part of a syndicate member and a subsidiary of a book running lead manager, we cannot say more than that at this point of time.
Yes, I think we have the regulatory requirements. We would strongly want to adhere to it, and I think we are restricted to our comments in this. I think we appreciate it. I'm sure the investors are knowledgeable enough to compare and take a right call on this.
Yeah. Now we have one question from Rajiv of Bokaro, from Bokaro. His question is: should we invest in IPO and invest through open market? So what I think the question is whether one should add on listing. That is what I think is the question. Now it all depends on what has been the response to the IPO from the QIB side, because typically the institutional participations are very excited to buy upon listing in certain IPOs. So in case the QIP portion has been oversubscribed many times and on the day of listing we have seen a lot of buying from them, then probably you could take a view about whether you want to wait for selling your allotted shares and instead add to your add some more shares. So that is what you should be doing based on the response to the IPO and the response on the listing day by the QIBs. So that I think summarizes the answer to your question.
I think you have a very positive response. Also, someone has already said investing in IPO through HDFC Securities as easy as eating a pie. I think I'm taking it as a
What,
compliment for our entire
who
technology
has
team.
said that?
Some gentleman from Bangalore
Huh.
has said that
So,
how IPO is allotted. Yeah, thank
hmm.
you so much, sir.
Hmm.
It's a compliment for our entire team out here.
Now
And
we have some questions on other shares which we will not be answering at this point of time because the purpose of this webinar is only IPOs and the recent IPOs.
exactly. So I think one question which is frequently coming out here is
No audio.
Deepak, more details. You know, what exactly are the details or parameters we need to look at in an IPO? You know, what are the details? If you can name, what are the few parameters we should on the red herring prospects, or what are the things we need to read as a cautious investor, or we how we can educate our investors? What are the things you need to look at in an before investing in an IPO?
See, now as a lay investors, one will not be able to do a very thorough, in-depth kind of a study, but broad parameters wise, the valuation parameters of price to earnings, price to book, in terms of those parameters, how does the IPO compare to the already listed peers? That is number one. Number two is how has the sales and profits of the company grown over the last 3 or 4 years? Number three, how have the margins behaved, and how has the working capital, the current assets minus current liabilities, the inventories, the debtors, etc., behaved as a percentage of the sales? So typically, as the sales grow up, the working capital requirement also goes up. But whether the working capital requirement is going up more than the sales or not. So these are the 4 or 5 basic parameters that one will have to look. Apart from that, the scope for the sector in the recent time is a very crucial thing when one will have to sort of take into account. We have seen a lot of microfinance companies getting listed at good valuations and giving good listing gains. So typically, currently, BFSI space has done well in the listed space. So there, if a company with established credential comes in, then you have to look at it a little more closely. So those are some parameters which one should be looking at when applying in the IPO.
Wow, that I think is the mostly commonly used questions, Deepak. And if maybe we can take the last two questions if the time permits. See, I think this is the question which most of the guys is wanting to know. That's clearly that a healthy sign that our retail investors are keen to make an analysis and study before investing. But then how many days IPO will get listed? I think.
Yeah, so that as I mentioned, the whole process of IPO typically is of about 7 to 10 days. So wherein the listing also happens in those calendar days. Though in terms of working days, it takes less, probably 7 or 8 days. From the time the IPO closes, within 7 to 8 working days, the IPO typically gets listed on an exchange. SEBI has been working constantly on crunching the time between the closure of the issue and listing, and they have succeeded to quite an extent in this.
I think that summarizes this webinar. Thank you, Deepak. I hope it would have been a very informative session for our investors. I think this has been a long due for our investors. If you see, we have almost got 70, 80 questions. I think everyone is asking only one question, which is, what are the parameters do I need to look at before investing in IPO? I think you have fairly covered what has happened in the last 10, 12 IPOs. I think that we have covered. I think in the future also there are a lot of IPOs in the waiting that what these investors should pay more attention. We have got a lot of compliments about us, our platform, that how easy IPO as a piece can be to invest. People are comparing it with Maggie and Pi. That I think our entire technology team should be happy to hear these compliments. I think we would, as an investor and as a reputed 10% market share in the IPO kind of a player, it is our duty and honor to keep engaging with you more frequently, and we are looking forward to engage more frequently in the coming space. Thank you once again to everyone. Thank you once again to you, Deepak, for making this webinar very, very lively. And we will see you soon. Thank you very
My
much.
pleasure, and thank you all participants for participating.
Thank you.